Well, I finally did it. I finally decided to sell my Harley Davidson, and I got myself a Triumph. No, I didn't sell the Pan America. The Pan America is here and doing just fine. But I did sell my Harley Davidson Road King. It was about 15 years ago when I test rode a Harley Road King, and a few months later I was back at the dealer signing papers and taking delivery of one of my very own. And I loved it. I commuted back and forth to work with it. I did day trips with it. I did long distance touring with it, ultimately racking up over 50,000 miles on that bike. Since then, I've had other bikes, but the Road King was always my go-to. But then 4 years ago, I test rode the Pan America. Decided I wanted one, but I wasn't quite sure if I was ready to give up my Road King in order to have one. So I didn't. Luckily, I was in a position where I didn't have to make that decision, and I could add the Pan America to my current fleet. But once I had the Pan America, the Road King was just being ridden less and less. The Pan America checked all the boxes, doing everything that the Road King could do, and so much more. It had better handling, way better performance, better comfort, and the Road King had better looks and better engine character, but those things by themselves were not enough, and so the Road King just started to sit more and more and collect dust in the garage. But I was still hesitant to sell it. Had a lot of emotional attachment to it still. It was the first bike that I did any overnight long distance trips on. The first bike that I rode on Skyline Drive through Virginia and Blue Ridge Parkway down the East Coast. It was the first bike that I've taken on Tail of the Dragon, and the first bike that I rode all the way down to Key West, Florida, and back here to Pennsylvania. But last summer, I did finally decide to let it go, so it was time for me to decide on adding something else to the stable. But what exactly? I thought about some different naked bikes like the Triumph Street Triple, Yamaha MT-09, Kawasaki Z900, but I was leaning more and more towards wanting something that looked like a traditional motorcycle. I thought about the Z900 RS or the Yamaha XSR 900, right? A retro sport motorcycle like that. But ultimately, I ended up deciding on the Triumph Speed Twin 1200. The Speed Twin delivers with low-end grunt and a satisfying exhaust note that is decidedly lacking on my Harley Pan America, and it completely blows away the Road King as far as handling and performance goes. What first drew me into the Speed Twin was its classic good looks. I like the brushed aluminum fenders, that traditional round headlight, the chrome bezeled analog gauges, the beautiful gas tank, the engine, the dual exhaust, everything about it just is a good classic looking motorcycle. Fit and finish is top notch. There's no wires or sensors sticking out that are going to detract from anything. Even the radiator for this 100 horsepower liquid cooled engine doesn't detract from the overall classic looks. But it was the test ride that sealed the deal for me. The 1200cc engine delivers plenty of get up and go grunt and continues pulling hard all the way through the rev range. Now it does have what I would consider a mild sporty riding position with a little bit of forward lean to it. It's not to the point where you're really down low and scrunched up like you would be on a Super Sport, but enough that it really invites you to throw it into corners and enjoy a good curvy, twisty road. The nimble handling coupled with that satisfying exhaust note just makes this bike a joy to ride. And while it's not a touring bike, it's still comfortable enough to be on for a long ride. In fact, I've ridden this bike on a multi-day trip through West Virginia and Kentucky this past summer while the Pan America was down and out in the shop for repairs. I know, insert joke here about Harley Davidson being in the shop, right? The seat's not too bad for a stock seat. I added some luggage on mine for the trip, and I even managed to get lost for a couple of miles on a gravel road. And while it's certainly no adventure bike, I did manage to hold my own and stay upright, even on sporty street tires. In fact, the only thing that really hindered that trip at all was the fuel range. This bike is only good for about, on average, 130 miles to a tank, so I had to fill up several times each day on that trip. But for just spending a day ripping around local twisty roads, this bike is more and more becoming my go-to for that. Now, no bike is perfect. All manufacturers cut corners somewhere to keep the cost down, and on the Triumph Speed Twin, they did that with the suspension. The rear suspension was just basic, non-adjustable twin shocks with preload adjusters, and I already took care of those. I replaced those with some fully adjustable units from Racetech, and the front suspension are cartridge forks, but there's no adjustability. And to make matters worse, they have a lot of internal friction and very, very slow rebound damping. It was to the point that I'd be riding on the road, and whenever there was a dip, it just felt like the entire front of the bike would fall into that dip rather than the forks extending. I did put stiffer springs that were more appropriate for my weight, and I also played around with oil viscosity. It helped, but didn't cure the issue, so I am going to do a complete swap of all the internals of these forks to give me better adjustability and better performance. Now, sure, there's plenty of other bikes out there that will easily outperform this one, but when it comes to the blend of classic cafe racer good looks and the modern performance in a package that's comfortable enough to ride all day, I really think the Triumph delivers. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Ride safe.